Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1502 Introduction to Community Media, and this is just a short overview video of the key topics that we'll be discussing, looking at in the 6th lecture of 2017. It's going to be 2018 before you know it. So the idea this week, last week we talked about the idea of community and what community media is, and how it is defined and what separates it, what makes it different from mainstream media, if you like. This week we're looking at the idea of, well, if we're going to talk about, define community media, we really need to define what community is. And so what I'll do is I'll work through some definitions of community that are in flux and that change. It's not a static issue. So we might start with we will start with an official definition from Ofcom, the broadcast regulator, of what community radio is. But then what I want to do is I want to look at the ideas that was suggested by Robert Putnam in his famous book Bowling Alone, which kind of describes an absence of community. So maybe one of the things that when we're thinking about community is that we know it when we see it, if you like. We feel it. It's hard to pin down, but we certainly know when it's absent, and we can put, we feel our sense of anxiety at the lack of a sense of community is quite astute. So having a working definition that we can use of what community is quite a problem, because everybody has a different angle, if you like, on what their sense of community is about. So what I want to do is look through some different examples, issues to do with things like community volunteering. There's a kind of a set kind of expectations about what it means to be a volunteer within a community. Communities of identity. We respond to issues to do with our ethnicity, our age, our gender, our sexual orientation, also our class, all sorts of different factors which kind of help to shape our sense of identity and what we where we feel we belong, I suppose. Now, increasingly, we don't feel like in our locality often. What we do identify with is our interests in terms of hobbies and sports and films and popular music and kind of games and things like that. So our communities become communities of interest rather than just identity. And one of the things that a community has to do, it has to integrate and assimilate people into the nature of that community. So a community is driven by collective goals. It has a kind of collective sense of endeavour. It wants to achieve certain things, and the people involved want to try and achieve certain things. But how is that process managed? So is that one of kind of, if you like, imposed engagement? Or is it one of self-definition, where communities come up with their own ideas of who they are based on their interests and based on the things that they find enlightening, empowering, and so things like Harry Potter fan communities or Doctor Who communities or Star Wars fans, a very, very powerful way of articulating an interest in ideas which go beyond simply being a white middle-aged man in the early parts of the 21st century, which can kind of tell us something about who we imagine we might be. So it's kind of like imagined senses of community. So what's the commonality? What's the common experience that people demonstrate and articulate in their sense of what, in how they describe their sense of community? What are the kind of challenges? I mean, we've seen challenges in recent years about social investment, looking at things like gentrification, looking at things like the way that urban environments change. So kind of not being as sustainable. What does it mean by a sustainable community? It's a big question. A participative community. We've touched on the idea of that. So how can we use our understanding of the different definitions of communities to kind of bring about a sense of enhanced interaction, a sense of engagement, a collective engagement, a kind of a greater, stronger, if you like, focus on civic participation, playing a role in the life of our communities. How do we go about this? Well, we have to learn to be community organisers. And if we want to do community media successfully, that's an essential element of what we do. We have to organise a community. We have to be in the situation whereby we can enable other people to participate and other people to engage in community life. So it's something that we'll be looking forward to. So as you pick up your skills as community reporters and community media practitioners, we'll keep one eye on where you're going next, which is to be inclusive. How will you be teaching and training other people to produce media? So as you learn, as you go along and you learn, you're going to be teaching and demonstrating and sharing your knowledge with other people, and that's a real challenge. It's not something that we're not here to kind of maintain the boundaries, that kind of, we're not gatekeepers to a hidden secret. Media isn't, it isn't rocket science. Anybody can do this stuff. So it's kind of, why don't we let more people into the process? There's no tricks. It's fairly straightforward. And community media really challenges some of the kind of mainstream ideas. But the starting point is to have a working definition of what we mean by community, or what people think their community is, rather than us trying to impose a definition of community. Anyway, the notes are up on the wiki, and you find them as usual at wiki.hour.dmu.ac.uk. I'll post them up and hopefully see you at the lecture on Monday.